Yep. So, hi guys, good evening. So here we have Arjun with us. So I'll just give a quick intro and then we'll have Arjun take over the session. So, so Arjun is the founding general partner at Special Invest, so which is a deep tech startup, in early stage investing firm, and they invest in startups in India, USA, and Israel. And he has also previously worked as an entrepreneur in his own venture named Travel Yatri, and has had experience in Yahoo and IBBO as well. So he's a great experienced guy in this field and is currently investing in startups. So is well versed with every sector you could imagine in the startup world. So I think we'll make it a bit interactive and we'll have the question answer session at the end, and we'll have Arjun share his experiences with his insights in the start of the session. And I think I'll ask everyone to leave their questions in the chat box or either in the question box, and then we'll collectively answer them, get them answered by Arjun at the end. So I'll hand over to Arjun now. Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much, Saksham, for the kind introduction, right? And for the invitation to the ESL also. Thank you so much for having me, right? I'm super excited to be part of this conversation with all of you, right? And share some of my observations and learnings over the years, right? As Saksham mentioned, I'm one of the founding partners at Special Invest. We're an early stage VC investing in deep science and technology startups at the very, very early stage. All right. In my own experience over more than 15 years has been in product technology startups, including my own startup, which is called Travelari, right? And today I'll share some of my learnings with all of you based on all those experiences, which is about the early stage of product building at a startup, and also how one in the early stages can think about customer access and customer, right? I have a few slides to assist me, but I would like it to be an open-ended, open discussion, right? And I will drive and maybe share some insights along the way. These are by no means exhaustive or complete or all correct, but these are my observations and my learnings. Hopefully it is valuable for all of you, young budding entrepreneurs out there, right? So super excited. I'll just share my screen and we will get started. Give me a second, please.
So, Arjun would like to just interrupt you for a second. So, if anyone has any doubt in between, he could raise hand and we'll probably pass him the mic to ask the question. So that is the procedure
Absolutely.
that goes on AirMeet. Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Please, you will have to help me guide through AirMeet. I've not used it regularly. So
Yeah.
when
Sure. Sure.
please let me how, right? I'll be happy to answer. Yeah. So super excited. I'm going to get started, right? So we're going to talk about, early stage product building and customer acquisition when a startup is just getting started, right? This is an interesting stage. One, the founder has come up with an idea, right? And thought there's an opportunity in a particular industry, in a particular market, right? To solve a particular problem with customers, and is ready to go out and build a solution and take it from there to build a business, right? And that's what makes this early stage exciting, when you are exploring a lot of things, when you're validating a bunch of hypotheses, right? And taking that forward to building out a successful startup, right? Thank you so much for having me. We'll get started. One of the key things that I've noticed that I would like to start off with is, what do you do before you start building, right? What happens during the time that you have the idea, you have maybe spoken to a few people, and you have taken the plunge to start the company, right? And this phase is very, very important to spend time and be very cautious about where you spend your time in and what you're trying to learn in this very early stage. So before you start building, I believe one, and before one starts writing a piece of code in the case of a software company, or starts building a hardware product, as the case might be, right? I think there is a few things that are important to spend time on, right? All of us and most of us are engineers. I was also an engineer when I started a company. So, we're all excited about starting to build a product. Let's start coding. Let's put the first version of the product out there, so on and so forth. Let's start coding, right? These are some of the first things that we think about. But I think it's very important to be a little more thoughtful before that stage and say, before I start coding, let me learn a little more about what I'm going to code for, right? And that's what we start talking about. Figure out who the prospective customer is, right? When you're building product and for customer acquisition, keeping the customer view is very, very important, and understanding and learning as much as possible about the customer is very important in the super early stage. So I would say, right, once you're starting off, start talking to as many people as possible in the prospective customer segment that you believe you are operating in, right? And go and have conversations with them, right? Try to clarify your view on who is this product for, right? On the product side, who is this product for? What is their behavior? What problem are you solving for this person or this set of people or for this business if it's a B2B business? Why is it so badly needed in the current environment, whatever you are building, right? What else are they using today to solve the same problem? Are they using something else that you are trying to make better, or they don't have a solution for this particular problem and therefore you are providing a solution to them, right? So identifying who the customer is, who it is for, why they need it, and which problem you are solving for them is very, very crucial, right? And finally, after understanding all of this and having multiple conversations, and conversations should unraveling what do they do in their everyday process, right? Which part of your assessment of the problem is clear to them, right? How big a problem is it? Is it a small problem that they're able to deal with and it's a nice to have what your solution is, or is it a must have? It is among the top 3 problems that they're facing, right? These are conversations one should have, right? And finally, from there you can evolve into how can this problem be solved, which is the first step in figuring out what product you have to build, right? So don't start building out on day 1, day 0, or day 1. Start trying to find out what you have to build before you start writing that first piece of code, right? The second thing which we are going to talk about going forward is also about customer acquisition. Even in that scenario, what you need to know is who's your customer, right? What is this personality of this customer, individual customer, or this business, right? Until you know that, you will not know how to reach them, how to contact them, how to talk to them, which is marketing, and therefore how to acquire them as customers for your product. You need to know who is the customer, what is their persona, right? Where can you find them, which is, where do they spend their time, digitally or offline? How do you reach out to them? And finally, through all these, you will figure out a way to say, how do you get them to use your product? Either way, the long story short, we're saying customer conversations and customer development is what we call in our industry is very, very crucial in the very early stages before you start building, right? We'll talk about building the product itself. While we are talking about having conversations with customers and learning more about their behavior and what they need precisely, that is the time when you start, before you start building, you first say, okay, I have a broad view of how this product will look like and what it will do, right? So you can articulate this through mockups and wireframes in the very early stages, right? Again, this is pre starting to code in a software context, right? So wireframes are one very specific way where you can start articulating and presenting to somebody saying, this is the product I'm building. This is how the product, this is the features of the product it will have. This is how it will function. And this is how you will get value out of it, right? So mockups and wireframes is super early stage for validation of your own assumptions and your own hypothesis, right? So do that. This is a cheap way of learning a lot, right? Without spending money and time, right? You can learn a lot by creating a few wireframes and mockups and going to the end customer and showing this to them and validating what your assumptions and your beliefs about their problems and the solution you're proposing to the customer, right? Uh, get feedback from this target audience on your wireframes and mockups. Are they understanding what you are presenting to them? Is it clear to them how this can solve the problem? Which part are they reacting to? Are they giving you suggestions to improve the wireframes and mockups? Is a very important time to spend. I would say this can last from a few days to a few weeks in the very early stage, right? Of depending on what type of product and what type of market you are solving for, right? For you to get this feedback and iterate over it. It's very important to listen and iterate, right? So you're listening to the customer, reacting to what you are showing them in terms of mockups and wireframes. And then you can iterate on these mockups and wireframes until you hear some degree of confidence from these early customer base that you are talking to, right? This customer base will not be very large, right? This could be in the B2B scenario, it is 1 or 2 customers. In the B2C scenario, it could be a set of 5, 10, 20 customers, who are typically known to you and they may be your close network of sorts. And we'll talk about this in the customer acquisition phase as well. So small set of people that you can trust that will give you feedback, who you can take, and they will give you time, which is very important, right? And you can showcase mockups and wireframes. This is the time, importantly, to listen and iterate, in my opinion, because you learn a lot through these conversations in the early stage. Once you have learned enough and you think your mockups and wireframes are quite solidified, there is enough clarity of what you have to build out, right? I would say is the time to make those mockups into a functional version of the product, right? And you could call this an early prototype, right? You could call this an alpha version of the product, right? There are various ways of addressing this. That is the time you start coding and actually start building alpha version, right? And you want to convert your mockups and wireframes into something that is functional and something that can be used, tried, and tested, right? Build the basic workflow of the product, right? Don't try to build many features. You don't have to build it perfectly. It doesn't have to be, the UI doesn't have to be very nice, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. The colors doesn't, the sizes, structures. You have to have the basic functionality working, right? What the user wants to do, right? If it's a 4-step process of building a product, right? Then you should be able to, those 4 steps should be able to take, you should be able to validate and showcase. For example, in my last startup, which was called Traveliyari.com, we were selling bus tickets online. We were an online bus ticket portal, right? So our alpha version was a simple website where one could go and search for a bus and say, I want to go from Bangalore to Chennai on a particular date. You could press search. You could get a bunch of search results of bus operators. You could select them. You could select a seat, and you could say buy the ticket. Right. So that's an alpha version. You go through the few steps. Right. That's an example of what is a basic functional product. Right. So that somebody can on it, can start using it, and give you feedback saying, okay, now the mockup has come to life, right? I'm using it, I can click on it, I know what happens in every stage. Then I start realizing this is the value I will get out of this product, right? And this you take back to your target customers, right? Maybe you can take this to more than your early set who you took your mockups and wireframes, because this is usable, right? You can take it to 20, 30, 40 people and ask them to start testing it, trying it, and give you feedback on aspects of the flow that you can use to make it better. This is also a very important phase to identify loops and gaps from your mock-up to your actual product, what you need to take care of, right? When the product has come to life. Very important phase again to get feedback from target customers, right? This is the phase also to observe and iterate. Earlier, you were only listening because you were having conversation, showing mockup. Now you can observe because people are clicking on things, people are doing action. Therefore, it gives you the ability to say, where are people finding it hard to navigate the product? Where are users finding it hard to understand what to do next? Where are they not finding information which they are probably looking for that you need to provide to them, right? These observations you should make note of and that will help improve the core features of the product, right? So I would call this the alpha version in the early phase. A few more users can put it out. Mostly these users will still come through networks and your access. This is still not public live and you don't want thousands of people using this yet, maybe, right? Maybe in the case of a consumer product, you could have a few hundred users or a few early thousand users also, right? Because there will be bugs in the system. It'll be incomplete in terms of certain specific aspects of, let's say, it could not have login, right? It may not have security, may not have certain types of dashboard that we use in very robust, fully completed products, right? So this phase is very important to learn about user behavior, right? When they get a new application in their hands. This takes us to the next phase. Once you have understood all of this, you have fixed some of the bugs, and you have made the features little more fully functional and holistic, right? You have made the core feature set rich and of high utility after all the learnings, right? That's time for a beta launch and you are ready for more real users out there, right? This is also the time to add on features that make adoption very easy, right? Login friendly. You can integrate, let's say, if you're a B2C product, how do you do a Facebook login or a Google login, which makes it super easy for people to use, right? Maybe from the first version to this version, you have added a few other features to the platform that was not there, few other capabilities, let me call it, right? For example, I'll tell you an example of what we did at Travelliari. When we launched the beta from the alpha version, we had just, this is what the flow will be. In the beta version, we actually had live bus operators available, right, for a few routes in the country. Somebody could actually use this to book a ticket, right, a real ticket, and then travel on the bus, right? So we actually launched in the very, very early stages, not with hundreds of routes and thousands of bus operators, but with, I think 6 to 8 routes and about a dozen bus operators, right? So actually in that stage, I remember you could go to the website travelliari.com and you would only search 6 permutation combinations of cities, right, of routes, because that is the only inventory of routes that we had bus tickets for, right? But the product was fully functional, right? You could search through these buses, the list of buses would come through, right? You could click on seats, you could see the availability of seats, you could find the timing, you could find the rating of the bus, maybe not the rating of the bus, that was still early days, right? You could find the timing, you could find what time the pickup drop is, you could know the location where the pickup drop is, which is all important for the user to know, without which he would probably not book a bus ticket, right? So this is a fully functional product. Core features are working completely, right? And the core features are of high utility, right? And there are basic add-on features that help you adopt this in a simple fashion. And you go to much more users. You basically make the website live and the application live, and you go to many more users. In the consumer world or in the B2C world, you can go to few hundreds and thousands of users at this stage, right? And in the B2B world, you can start going to 5, 10, 15, 20 customers in this stage and start showing them the product and start asking them to use this product, right? And this is a time, I would say, that one can start measuring and iterating the product, right? So because you know what behavior, where are people clicking on, where are they coming from, you start gathering a lot of information and data, because you are talking about hundreds and thousands of users in the B2C, and much more rich information available to you from many more users, right? So this is a time and this is a phase to measure and iterate, right? If you notice carefully, we're talking about continuous iteration at every stage, right? Even in the early stage, there is not enough data. Data will keep growing, feedback, information, and how people use it. Data available to you will keep increasing. And this is the time to keep learning from this data and iterating over this process, right? The beta launch onwards is immense learning for you to figure out what to do and then become a full-fledged launch. I would say the beta launch and the alpha would last a few weeks so that you can fix bugs, you can learn and make it more richer. The beta could even last a few months, I would say, right? Because before all the problems are in the website, in your product, and you feel that you can actually start marketing the product. Maybe you can start spending money. Maybe that's the time maybe you are able to raise some money from investors, possible all of that, right? So this is a phase I would say can last as much also, right? So that is the phase about building the product in the very early stage. We'll talk a little bit about getting customers, right? And we spoke about the 3 phases in the past, and we'll talk a little bit about what happens at each phase, right? In the super early stage, when you're doing wireframing and early prototype and maybe alpha version as well, right? What you want is a few early friendly customers, right? Who will see what you're building, listen to what you're telling them, look at it, give you feedback, right? And this is the time for you to learn more about customer requirements, right? Therefore, that will give you more validation about the assumptions that you as an entrepreneur, as a founder are making about the segment and the opportunity in front of you, right? Time for you to get friendly customers. You will not get anybody in this stage. It's hard to get just somebody out there to try something that is getting built out early, right? Therefore, we would say look into your friends and family networks and your very close networks to find people who are relevant, of course, right? If some of them are in the industry that you are targeting or have the pain point that you are solving for, that is the ideal person, ideal early customers to talk to, right? They may not be paying you money for this product at this point in time, but what they're giving you is time, and that time and feedback is immensely valuable, right? So look for friends, close networks as places where you will find your early friendly customers. After this would be the stage that you have probably built out the alpha or the beta product, and you want few more users to start using the product because you want the product to get tested, you want the bugs to get shown to you, you want to get more critical feedback about user behavior, about the flow of the product, about feature sets, about enhancing parts of what you have built out. So you basically want to do hypothesis testing with actual users, right? And this is the time to go into your wider networks and get referrals, right? To get multiple more users to start using your product and your platform. In the B2C scenario, this could be about going from a few tens of users to going to a few hundreds and a few early thousands of users, right? And maybe you can put the link out into certain WhatsApp groups you have. You can put the link out into your college forums, right? You can put the link out on Twitter, maybe to a few people, or LinkedIn or Facebook, some social networks a little bit, and start testing it, saying so that more and more people outside your core network are starting to use it, and you will be able to get feedback from them. The difference between the previous phase and this phase is you can directly have conversations with your early friends and close networks. These sets might give you feedback on the website, through email, through chat, but they are not known friends of yours, right? So they may not give you as much time as the previous set of customers or users, right? Because they're not known to you, and there are many more, right? So you have to then cumulatively get their feedback, and you can also measure on your own product and your website how they are using the product. So this is the time to get user behavior, and you will start hearing, oh, I'm using this, but I want one more feature, right? I would love if this feature also had this capability, right? So you'll also start getting some early insights that, okay, this is useful, but I can only use it or pay for it and become a loyal or a long-term user if it had certain other capabilities, right? So that's this early adopter phase. This is not for the mass audience, because the mass audience will only try something when it is fully baked in, when it is well marketed, when it has no bugs whatsoever, all the glitches are taken care of, so to speak, right? So this is a phase when people who are willing to try new products, right, that's what we call early adopters, will try your product. So there are a lot of platforms also where you can try and find early adopters, right? So one has to look for them and hopefully get access to as many of these early adopters to test your product in this stage. After this is the time when you start getting product market fit. That is the time to go to real customers. This is the real world. This is a broader set of all customers who are in the vicinity of needing your solution, needing your product, right? You need your features, your core product offering to be very rich, to, to be providing the full value that is expected by the end customers, right? You need to have solved for as many bugs as possible by this time, because there will be low barrier to leaving the product. People will try it, but if it doesn't solve the problem, or if it is not intuitive enough, if it is not simple enough to use, people will stop using the product and leave, right? They will only use products that is highly valuable to them, and because they are spending their time or their money to use the product, right? So it is very, very important in this stage to figure out how do you reach out to these customers. This is the time to start marketing, right? Therefore, what you need to know, where do your real customers lie, right? And what you would have learned from your previous two phases is, who is your customer? What do they need your solution for? Where do they hang out? So you can start realizing that I know what channels to use to start marketing my product and start selling my product, right? So this is the time to identify different channels where your customer audience is likely to find you and is likely to, bite on certain marketing message of yours, and therefore start using your product, right? Digital marketing, obviously, for all digital products are the easiest ways to find customers in the early stage, right? So you can go to Google. If you think your customers are searching for some keyword or some query, right, then it is your job to make your website and your product SEO friendly, which is Google search friendly, basically, so that it is, when somebody types a certain phrase of in their searching for your product or certain problem statement, they find you, right, in those search results, and through that they come to your product and they start adopting your product. Social media, of course, over the last few years has become very, very popular as a means, right? You can promote your product, you can talk about your product, you can talk about the features of your product. It's very, very important, right? And you can use Facebook, you can use Twitter, you can use LinkedIn. There are, more sophisticated forums today. Snap is there. There is Reddit. There is Quora, right? All of these forums, different types of customers, different types of users hang out in different forums and different platforms, and therefore you have to know very clearly where your target prospective customers lie, right? And from each phase, you should try to learn where similar. If you find 5 customers who are liking your product, then you have to find, where can I find more such people? More. Where can I go from 5 to 50 to 500 to 5,000 and so on and so forth, right? So the final phase, which is where product market fit lies, is to say there is enough demand for your product. Enough customers are looking for your product and finding your product. And once they start using it, they're really liking your product. And majority of them are not leaving your product, and therefore coming back also on a regular basis to engage and use your product. That is what we call as product market fit, that you have found the market for your product. That is the holy grail for most startups, right? Once startups find product market fit, they can scale from there. They can therefore start spending more money, and specifically a lot more money, on customer acquisition by doing advertising, marketing, sales, and put their processes in place, right? To go from a small set of early users and early adopter customers to a larger set of customers who will adopt all of this, right? Right. So these are the 3 early phases of customer access and customer acquisitions, right? I will pause a little bit here. If anybody has any thoughts, questions, happy to talk about this. Right? This is the crux what we have spoken so far.
I think Arjun, we have a question here from Navneet. So
Sure.
he's asking to suggest you a few platforms to find early adopters.
Good question. Good question. I think I would look at dedicated 2 3 places, right? Dedicated forums where your end customers lie. For you, I don't know if you have looked at a platform called Product Hunt, right? Product Hunt is a platform where new products are launched on a daily basis, and there is a bunch of very future thinking early adopters who try to look and try to adopt and try these early new products, right? And you can market your platform on places like Product Hunt, on places like Reddit, because there are targeted forums there. There is probably platforms such as Quora, right? Because there are domain experts there, industry experts there. Within Facebook and LinkedIn, you should find groups and forums where type of customers that you are looking for are hanging out, right? There are plethora of groups. There could be groups on WhatsApp, right? So you have to look at people in that particular domain and in that industry. Where are they coming together? Where are they discussing things? Where are small discussion forums like that and knowledge sharing happening? Those are the places where you can be part of, and you should be part of these very early, right? For example, you should be part of these even in the wireframe and the alpha version stage. And if you are part of this, then you know where to launch, right? There could be WhatsApp groups that are industry specialists, Telegram groups, right? So these are all places. So I would look at groups across social platforms. I would look at Product Hunt and related platforms. Yeah, I think this would be the places where I would look for early adopters, right? More often than not.
So Arjun, we have another question here from Arjav. So he's asking that what is the stage when we should start thinking about burning money?
That's a good question. I would say burning money for customer acquisition has to come once you know very clearly who your customer segment is, where are they, and you have already gotten a few of them from free channels, right? Basically, in this slide, if you look at it, you should have achieved product market fit, right? Because if you start spending money before finding product market fit, you're actually wasting money. You're only spending money to learn and where, right? If you have 5 different types of customers, right, and only 2 of them have the highest need for your product, until you have found that 2 sets of customers and you have found a bunch of them already using your product, and then you know that there are hundreds and thousands of them out there, right? That is when you spend money to get those hundreds and thousands of them, right? Before that, your marketing dollars, right, your marketing budget will get wasted, right? You can use small amounts of money to do tests and do experiments, right? To say, will I find customers here? If I, for example, if I spend, let's say, 5,000 rupees on Google Ads, right, for certain keywords and queries, how many people will click on that ad? How many people will come to my website? And then how many people will use my product and buy my product, right? Plus, right, I will go back to our example of selling bus tickets at my startup, right? You could do a small test to say if people are searching bus tickets from Bangalore to Chennai, or bus tickets from Delhi to Agra, right? There are thousands of people, right, who are searching this query on Google, right? And if you have a good, if you have that buses available for those routes, right, we would put an ad for that route, right? And then we would see how many people will click on this, who will understand what the ad is, click on the ad, come to our website, search for that route, look for a bus, and then book a bus ticket, right? So you can do trials and experiments to say, okay, does Google work for me as a channel of customer acquisition? If I put an ad on Facebook, does Facebook work as a customer acquisition channel? If I use LinkedIn as a customer acquisition channel, does LinkedIn work for me, right? Once you can do these experiments and spend small amounts of money. But before you start spending a lot of money, right, I think it is advisable to get product market fit and know very clearly which your channels of or which your main channels of customer acquisition are. And to be honest, that is also the reason why once investors are willing to invest in a company in the later stages of Series A and beyond, once there is product market fit. So if you go to larger investors for product market, for Series A money and for scaling capital, they will tell you, they will ask you questions such as, how many customers do you have? Where do you get them from? And do you know what your customer acquisition cost is? Right? And these questions, once you have clarity on, is when somebody can give you a few $1,000,000 to spend more on specific targeted channels, so that you know that from this channel I can, if I spend $1 million or $500,000, what is the ROI I will get? How many customers will I get? And therefore, how much revenue I can make. Hope that was clear.
So, Arjun, I have a question myself. So, if you could answer.
Please.
So, yeah. So, on the product side, when we are building something, so it's a general question that it's like in today's world, everything requires some amount of coding for developing any product. So, for,
Yes.
what could be a solution for someone who is not that much proficient in coding and wants to develop any technical product? Or let's not only limit us to coding, or for example any tech product. Like, I'll take the example of Elon Musk. So for example, if he was building Tesla, or let's say SpaceX, so if he is not uh, that much knowledgeable about that field, so how should one go about building that level of technical product without having knowledge? So
In, that's an interesting question. That's an interesting question, right? I think one has to look at the complexity of the product, right? I think, for example, building an app, right, today has become super easy. Building a simple website has become very, very easy, right? And that is true even for, let's say, no somebody who doesn't know how to code, right? As the complexity grows in what you are building, right? I think it is very important to have a technical co-founder, right, in the team, right, in the founding team, right? And therefore, one of the founders should be building the product at the bare minimum, right? And it becomes particularly true when the product is much more complicated, like in the case that you are talking about of Elon Musk and SpaceX or Tesla or whatever. That's not something simple to build, right? If you don't know, then you have to learn, right? And to be honest, what I've heard and what I've read is Elon Musk has learned all of this by himself. He may not have been an aerospace engineer, or he may not have been an automobile engineer or a mechanical engineer. He actually worked at PayPal, right? He was a software guy, right? But he went out and learned exactly what was needed, right? And then you have to learn a lot and then get somebody capable around you, right, who can become CTO, right, who can be a co-founder, right? If you are not necessarily going to build a product, then you should have somebody like that close to you. On the simpler products, let's say a simple website, a simple app, consumer app, right, a simplistic app, I would say what is exciting today is that there are a lot of no code and low code platforms available, right, that make it simple for even a non-coder or a non-technically savvy person to figure out how to build at least early versions of the product. May not be the final version of the product and the most sophisticated version of the product, but the early version of the product, which you can take out to market, get early feedback, and users should start testing it and trying it. I think on the simpler software product side, particularly, actually, I would say only on the simpler software product side, right, it has become easier because of a lot of no code and low code platforms. So one should do some research on identifying what these platforms are, spend a little bit of time, and I think one should be able to launch these platforms. Another example I will give in today's world is, for example, you want to start an e-commerce business, right? Now, e-commerce, the business is actually e-commerce, which is about transacting, buying and selling goods, right? The platform is digital and online. And if you see today, it has become super easy to start an e-commerce platform, correct? You can use platforms such as Shopify, you can use platforms such as WooCommerce, and of many others out there, right? Now, these are not necessarily technically complex to use and set up, right? These only need setup. They need configuration. They don't necessarily need, coding and technical sophistication, right? So these are things that can be easily set up, right? So there is one has to see the complexity of what you're trying to build. I would say deep science, deep technology, it would be very hard to build that out without founding members having deep technological capability for that particular segment and that domain. Any other questions?
I think we have no questions for right now. I think in the end we can answer if any comes up. I think
Yeah, no, I think this is the crux, right? I just want to revisit these two things. I want all of us to have key takeaways here, right? From both those previous things. Either you're building a product or trying to get users to use your product. Very important for one to have, the customer at the center of everything that you do, right? In the early stages, to learn about, is your assumption about what problem you're solving the correct assumption? So talk to your customer about validating that assumption. Show these early people wireframes, mock-ups of what you are building. Tell them this is what it may look like, how it will work. If you click here, if you do this is what it will do. And show them the value. Let them give feedback on that, right? Early set of customers, when you build the alpha version, when you build your first prototype or your MVP, also take it to your early customers and keep listening to them, right? So keep the customer right at the center of everything. Learning about who will use it, why will they use it, how often will they use it, how deeply is it solving the problem. All of these factors have to be taken into account as you build every single feature, right? And not just start building multiple features. And through this entire phase, the other thing I would highlight and look for is to say, are you iterating at every single stage? You can iterate at idea stage, you can iterate at wireframe stage, you have to iterate at starting coding in MVP prototype stage, you have to iterate after that as well, you have to iterate at alpha, beta, every single stage. You also have to continuously iterate when you are acquiring customers, because you will learn that, okay, one platform is working. For example, A/B testing is a tool that everybody uses, right? It's become a very popular tool for identifying, right? You can try two types of showcasing the same product, and you can identify which version is working better, which message of yours is getting, clarity in the minds of the customer, right? And use that A versus B, and continuously keep iterating on that. That will tell you more about your marketing message, right? So that you are ready when you have to start spending dollars, you are ready with your marketing message, and it is becoming clearer and clearer how to tell your customer why they should use your product, right? Once the product is ready, once a few people are using it, your job is also to do marketing and sales. And in the marketing and sales side, messaging is the clear part, right? Why should they use you? What value do they derive from it? What is the price of what do they have to pay for this? So on and so forth, right? So your messaging has to start getting clear. And all of these gets better and better by learning and iterating, right? So keep speed of iteration and continuous learning to be at the crux of your founder mentality in the very early stages. That would be my second point. The third point, which is very important, which sometimes gets lost and a lot of entrepreneurs make a mistake in, is they start building a lot of things and they start building multiple features, while even one or the core feature is not getting high usage and utility, right? So the focus has to be very important, right? One should not build 10 things before understanding clearly why to build it and why what the customer needs, right? So focus is the third thing that I would emphasize on, saying build fewer features, right? Build one or two features that get very deep high engagement from your early users and customers, right? They will ask you for more features, right? But be very thoughtful about understanding which second feature, third feature that you build, right? No point in building 10 features when you don't have one or two features that your end customers are not loving, right? They should love, product, and therefore a business becomes extremely successful when one thing is really, really loved, right? Over a period, and therefore people keep coming back to use that product, right? Better to have one feature that is loved than 10 features that are ignored, right? So that is the place where one has to focus. And all of these can only happen if you do the previous two steps very well. right? Because that tells you what to focus on, right? If you spent enough time talking to customers, if you spent enough time learning about customers, and if you spent enough time iterating through those learnings, you will be focused on the right part of your product, the right feature set. Therefore, you will have high engagement, high utility for your end customers, which will attract more and more users, right? And that is the holy grail, right? Where without spending too much money, is are you able to get more and more customers, right? And that can only happen when your product and the core feature of your product has very high utility, which will lead to repeat usage, high frequency usage, right? And high value outcome for the users of your product. Of course, this differs from how you measure it, differs from B2C, B2B, and maybe hardware products, so on and so forth, right? In B2B, you can get this from tens of customers, right? Like 10 businesses using your product or 20 businesses using your product can give you nature of engagement, can give you feedback, right? But in B2C, high frequency, high return, churn, how many people use the product for some time and leave your product, right? All of that is very important for you to measure. And you can measure through analytics and data analytics that are available on your website, right? There you have to look at few thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of users to measure how user behavior is, right? Just to reiterate, I will say customer at the center of everything. Iteration, continuous learning and iteration at high speed is crucial to get where you want to get, and then focusing on the biggest aspects of your product that have highest value or highest customer acquisition opportunity. So these are the things I would focus on in the very, very early stages of, right? If you do well and keep iterating, I would say just go out and build.
So, Arjun, just a question from my side. So, if you could share your experience of travel Yari, where you went wrong or where you went correct, just a little bit of excerpt from
Happy
that.
to do that. Happy to do
Yeah.
that, right? So one thing I would, say, for example, right, we started by talking to many, many bus operators, right? And to say what were their problems, where were they facing issues, and and we also looked at the ecosystem to say what is competition doing, which is also an important part here. To say, okay, are enough, bus tickets available on the internet easily, right? And which geographies are people searching for bus routes, right? Which bus operators are selling less bus tickets? Which are the bus operators do not have online bus ticketing presence? All of this was very important in the very early stages. And I'm talking about 2009, 2010, where there was probably one or two bus ticketing websites in the country, right? And we were also starting at that point in time, right? So talking to bus operators as well as talking to people who frequently traveled on buses, right? So we spoke to a lot of software engineers in Bangalore, for example, because their hometown was either Hyderabad, Kerala, Chennai, somewhere, and every weekend or every second weekend, once a month, they would go back to their hometown on the weekend, right? On a Saturday night or a Friday night, right? And they would typically travel by buses, right? So we would actually go out to software technology parks, we would go out to bus stops and say, where were they buying their tickets from, right? What were their preference of types of buses that they were looking for? If we gave them an easy alternative of, you know, building a, of buying a ticket online, what would they want, right? Would that be easier for them to buy? Where did they face problems in buying tickets, right? So these were all the conversations that we had, which led us to building our first version of the product. What we of course did was finding a high frequency, routes, right, which were the highest frequency routes, right, where bus travel was very popular, right? And then we went out and built systems for those bus operators who are running on these sectors, right? Provided them a simple platform or software where they could upload and provide their inventory, right? Therefore, we were able to get access to the bus tickets of these bus operators and put it up on a website, right? And then we knew that there were queries, right, of users who were searching on Google, right? Google search engine was our first way of acquiring customers, right? So we know there were X thousand queries a day on, let's say, Bangalore to Chennai bus tickets, right? Bangalore to Chennai bus operators, right? So there were, let's say, half a dozen to 1 dozen type of queries that were being searched, right? And we wanted our website to show up, right, whenever these queries were searched. So we made sure our main website had these keywords in them, had these phrases in them for it to be search engine optimized, right? And slowly what happened that whenever these queries would come, we would have our website show up, people would click on the search result and come to our website, and then they would search, right? We actually very interestingly started making very custom pages for Bangalore and Chennai bus tickets, bus routes. So you would land on a page where you would see all the bus operators for Bangalore and Chennai, right? And we would actually, for the next particular day, right, we also realized that people were mainly searching to travel in the next 2 days, right? Because that was a classic user behavior, which we learned from talking to customers. And when we were able to do that, right, the page that the customer landed on was a page that showed Bangalore to Chennai bus operators, was a page that showed ticket price for the next day or the next Friday coming up, right? So that it was, as soon as somebody landed on that page, it was very clear to them, it was precisely what they were looking for, right? And that made it easy for them to click on that option and then move forward into booking the bus ticket, right? Basically, what we were trying to do is we had a funnel, right? At the start of the funnel was getting customers to come into our website from Google, right? One channel, very focused strategy, make them to come to our website based on the query that they have put and find relevant things of what they are looking for, right? Once they find it, then you move them through the funnel. Go, the broad funnel is thousands of users coming to Google. It's very wide, right? From there, coming to our website is a subset of it. On page one of the website is a subset of it. Then you get them to get to page two, which is actually the bus results, search results. That is a smaller set of customers. Then you get them to select one of the buses that they want to do. It can be, right? We also tried to identify whether people were preferring AC buses versus non-AC buses, whether they were preferring sleeper buses versus non-sleeper, right? Seater. All of these questions we had quite detailed, we had done market research, talk to customers. And therefore, we would highlight or show this. If we knew that people were preferring AC more than non-AC, AC results would show up on top, right? That made it easier for the user to find that result, right? And find the bus that he was looking for or the preference that he was looking for, right? We looked at when were people booking tickets most often from Bangalore to Chennai, for example, right? Most of them were software engineers. So we understood that they were traveling Friday night or Saturday night. So we also, in the search results, we put a filter in such a way that we showed the first result starting after 6 p.m. Right? So they're all small tricks, but to know, understand which tricks to use and which tactics to use and what sort of, how do you get your website to be absolutely targeted at who's using and how they will use it and how will it make it easy for them to get to the next stage and finally book a ticket, right? This all came from our conversations with both bus operators as well as travelers, right? Which took many months actually in the early days. So when we launched, our website was very targeted and very focused whoever came. What we did not have is we did not have a brand. Nobody knew the name Travelyaari.com. For example, everybody knows the name of, if you have to buy bus airline tickets, you can go to Goibibo or you can go to Make My Trip, right? When you don't have a brand as a startup, this is how you're trying to make the life of your customer very easy, right? And to be able to do that, you have to know more about his behavior and how you can solve his problem, right? So these were a few examples. Does that give you some context of how we were able to get customers and also get them to come to our website and do a transaction, right? Of course, we did a bunch of other things also once they were on the, let's say, the payment page, right? we also found out what were the most preferred payment option, right, for these customers. Was it net banking, debit card, was it credit card, right? Of course, there was no UPI and all of that, and no Paytm and all of that also, or just starting, right? So we identified that, and therefore we would prioritize the option which was the most popular payment option, right? So credit card, for example, was very less penetrated, which means debit cards and net banking was the most preferred option those days. Also, even in those days, we started seeing that cash on delivery was an option. So cash on delivery was something that we learned after some time, and we were able to provide a cash on delivery option also, right? So all of these are customer learnings that were used to make the product simpler to use, richer to use, and therefore, whenever customers came, it became easier for them to go through the funnel and make a transaction and convert as a end customer. And once we realized this started happening, that enough people were using it in this form or shape, then we were also able to raise VC funding, and we were also able to start spending more money on specific channels, right? Like Google, right? And not just SEO or not just free organic traffic. We also started spending money on Google Ads, right? In the earlier days before this was validated, we did not spend money on Google. We only made sure that our website was optimized in such a way and was built in such a way that we came up in the top few results for the queries which the users were searching us for.
So I think Arjun, that definitely makes a lot of sense, and that answered quite many queries. So moving on to the questions that the attendees have asked. So one question is that true that investors do not invest in companies who uses app from app builder sites? So basically outsource technology, I think they're asking. Yeah. This is from
Okay, that's an
Abhinav.
interesting question. See, there is no zero or one yes or no answer, right? It is preferred that you build it yourself, right? Basically, if technology is crucial and core to whatever you are building, right, and whatever business you are in, right, it is better if it is in-house than it is outside, right? And the reason is that it enables any team that is in-house as opposed to outsourced is always going to have deeper learning, is going to have more control on what they're building, is also going to be faster in their approach of iterating features and products, right? One of the things that is very important for in the earlier stages and in pretty much all stages of business and product building for investors is speed of execution, right? So one of the aspects of being an outsourced product development center is there is a large cost of communication. And you tell them, they may understand, they may not understand. You will give them requirements, they will understand some of it, they will not understand some of it, or you will have to write down a lot of deep literature and product requirement specifications before you start building out a feature. Because otherwise, how will the outsourced product development understand what you're building, right? And they don't have enough context because you know the business the best, you know the product requirements the best, you know the customer requirements the best, right? So there's always a gap between what you can do in-house and a small team that you can sit with and iterate over and quickly start building out whatever you want to build out, as opposed to an outsourced development center, right? Those are the reasons why investors prefer that you have your own engineering team or your development and your execution team. Having said that, if you can showcase to them that despite having a third party team, not fully in house, you have been able to execute well and built a product and made some product and made some progress, I would think that some investors will be happy to also take a look, right? But you have to remember that majority of the successful companies out there build their own product as opposed to outsourcing the core product, particularly when the technology starts becoming more and more complex, right, and is more sophisticated. It is core part of your business IP, right? And that intellectual property, that is not just simple code, it is code plus knowledge and how every system works amongst each other, right? And optimization at every level. And that is best done in-house than outsourced, right? So it's possible to get funding even with outsourcing, but I would say it will reduce your odds. And sooner or later, I think it's preferred to have your entire engineering and technology teams in-house, right? Because it definitely adds value for building for scale. I don't actually know of very large successful companies that they may have started by having outsourced, but over a period of time, they definitely moved on to having in-house technology.
So moving on to the next question, I think that pretty much answered Abhinav's question. So this is from Agrim. So he's asking that usually the big giants in the industry are efficient in production and have a low cost of goods and services and boast a high market share. So how can a newcomer compete with the limited resources and get consumers attracted?
Very important question. Very good question, actually, for the early stage. And the way I would look at it is this has always been the case in business forever. Correct? This is not something that is true the last 5 years or the last 10 years or the last 20 years. This has been true for 20, 50, 100 years, right? That been large incumbents and industry leaders who have a large market share in a particular industry, in a particular vertical. Therefore, they get advantages of scale, right? But one also has to remember that consistently startups have disrupted multiple industries over and over again, right? Despite in that industry already having large incumbents and large players. And the advantage for a startup is being nimble, being innovative, right? So one has to look at the problem that, let's say, a large company is solving. And if you have to go after that problem and solve it for end customers, very important for you to do things that make your product or your offering or your service substantially better than what is already here. And that is the essence of innovation. Correct? You have to because incumbents have a lot of inherent advantages and it is challenging for you to enter the market. You cannot go to the same customer of your large competitor with a slightly better product or a not better product. Definitely cannot go with a not better product. If you also go with only a slightly better product, make incrementally better. If it's incrementally better, it may be hard for somebody to customer to switch from the large player to the smaller player because the cost advantage will not be there, right? Even if it's slightly better, he will be probably getting it cheaper from the larger existing company, right? And therefore, it will be hard for you to get a new customer. And therefore, what investors and entrepreneurs, of course, should always look for is to try to make something substantially better. We call this crudely or broadly as let's try and do something 10x better, right? 10x does not necessarily mean measuring exact 10x, but it just means that it is not just 1.1x. It's not incrementally better than existing solutions. It is substantially better than existing solutions, which the incumbents and the large companies have. And when you showcase that to the end customer, they should say, wow, this is so much better that I'm willing to either pay more for this solution because it solves my problem in such a better way, right? So I will, even if I pay a little more money, it is good enough for me, and I will move from the existing large incumbent business to the new business, this startup, or I will pay the same amount of money, but I'll try you out. They will give you a chance, right? The chance itself is hard for you to get, right? To be able to get that chance, you have to showcase a much more innovative product. If anybody goes and builds the same product as Facebook today, nobody's going to go to Facebook. If anybody goes and builds another e-commerce portal, right, which is equally good as, let's say, a Flipkart or an Amazon, I don't think people are going to use it. For a new player to come in, it has to be substantially better than what is out there in the market. And your innovation can be on multiple fronts. Innovation can be on, it can be on technology, it can be on the value add, it can be on product features, it can be on how we are bundling it together. right? One has to understand which piece you are doing innovation on. And finally, the value of the product for the end customer has to be substantially better than using whatever he's already using. And that is the opportunity. And then from one customer, you will get 5 customers leading to 10 customers and 20 customers. After a while, you will also start getting certain advantages of scale, right? But in the early days, the best way to compete with the big boys is out innovate them and use your advantage of being nimble and super fast because you're a 2 member, 5 member, 10 member startup, right? While that to innovate for a very large company takes time, right? Because they are set in their processes and their systems, right? They cannot change what they're already been building. One thing is working for them, they are only improving that slowly but steadily. They will not change overnight. You have the advantage of you have no baggage, you have no background, right? You can do something in a very, very fresh manner, in a completely innovative fashion that the big company cannot do. And you can do it in a much faster way. You can iterate. If your customer tells you, I don't like this way of doing this, I don't like this feature or this approach of solving this problem, I want to change, you can go back and in 2 weeks, fix that, change that model, and go back to the customer and say, will you use this in this new form? You are being nimble and being ability to have a direct conversation with the customer and listen and iterate, which is what I said, learn and iterate. That is the advantage that startup has over the large incumbent customer, right? It's not, you are not competing at the same level, but you're competing on a whole different parameter of how to get a new customer. Yeah, limited resources are part of that. Therefore, you have to hustle more, you out innovate, both in the product as well as how you acquire and convince a new customer to get your user. Not easy, but see, over so many years, this has happened consistently, right? And therefore, there is always hope for a startup that you can beat a large organization by innovation, right? I will give a classic example. When Google started in late 90s, right? There were already 3, 4, 5 very large players who were operating search engines, right? So Google was not the first search engine in the market. There were very large companies like Yahoo, uh, you know, uh, Microsoft, some others who had search engines already. But Google came and built a search engine that was so much better than all the existing search engines in the market, right? Their PageRank algorithm was so much better. So you could see the difference. When a user went to Google, you would find the result, find the website that you were looking for, as opposed to not being easy to find. And this was happening in Google's case. They were solving the problem or giving the right search result, I would say 99 out of 100 times, while till then, I think all the others were giving 80 out of 100 times or something like that. It started getting so much better, right? That people started moving to Google, right? Because one click, best answer on top. First result was always the best answer. That was such a wow feeling. You never had to go down the search results and say, oh no, this is not what I was looking for, right? So they had done some magic in their algorithm in the product, right? That was leading them.
Yeah. So this is a question by Ankur. I think this is on the similar lines only. So he's asking that how to enter an industry where competitors existing with similar products and ideas are there.
Yeah, I think, repeat of what I said in the past, make your product much better than what competitors are providing. Make your sales and marketing approach much better, which is basically how do you get yourself doing better of how you can reach your customers than your competition, right? Finally, if possible, if you have the ability to provide the same solution at a much cheaper cost, cost can be an advantage, right? But I would say better product, better ways of reaching your customer and marketing to your customer, right? Find places where or places where customers are available that your customers don't know of, your competitors don't know of, right? And double down on that and find a new channel. Basically, find a new channel for sales, right? Which nobody else has found, right? or which very little people are focusing on. So that's a way to tap a market and get customers faster and better than your competition. And then finally, cost is also one of the levers that you can look at. Overall, I would also say in the long term, service matters. How you treat your customers once they're onboarded, right? Once they're starting to use your customers on a regular basis, what other are you enhancing your features on a regular basis? Are you giving them better service, right? Do they have better customer support, right? All of these factors matter, right? So one, try to beat your competition on not just one, but on multiple parameters. And cumulatively, you will be much better.
So, moving, and Arjun, can we move on to the next
Please.
question?
Yeah.
So this is by Shruti. So she's asking that how should one go about identifying the basis for target customer segmentation and evaluate potential and commercial attractiveness of these segments?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. That's a tough question, right? But I think
So should we repeat?
no, I can read it also. So I got it. I read the question. So it's clear to me, right? I think what we spoke about at the early stage, which is how closely are you listening to your customer? Are you understanding the pain points of the customer? Understanding what their context is, right? And from there, identifying segmentation, right? In the same industry, you will have multiple large segments and multiple medium-sized segments and multiple small segments for what you are offering. So one has to start bucketing customers based on certain parameters. And some of these parameters could be size of the customer, right? And size could mean how many customers do they have, how much revenues do they do, how many employees do they have, so on and so forth, right? Are they a large enterprise? Are they a mid-sized enterprise or a mid-sized company? Or are they a small company, right? Which tells you what sort of behavior patterns that they will have in using a particular product, right? Which will tell you what budgets they will have for the particular product that you are offering to them, which will tell you their expectation of service, which will tell you, therefore, finally, the budget tells you what is their ability to pay, right? And therefore, you can say, if this costs me so much to build, so much to sell, so much to service, this is your cost. And for this customer, the product, this sized customer, for the largest size customer, the value is, let us say, $1,000 of a particular product, right? For a mid-sized customer, for the same, very similar product, he might be willing to live with slightly less features or slightly lesser service, but he might be willing to pay only, let us say, $500. And a small customer who also needs the same product, but he is willing to take the base version of the product, and he is willing to pay only $100. So you see, the same product can have different value for different people, and therefore different feature sets, and therefore different price points. And once you are able to break this down, and therefore you have to be clear about talking to these customers and understanding their behavior, their requirement, their ability to pay, and then segment them. And you have to pick your segments correctly based on what it is, what is it costing you to make the product, to sell the product, and finally service the product. And effectively go to the segment where the number of customers and the value of the individual customer is maximized for you, right? So if $1,000, if you get 100 customers, that gives you $100,000 in revenue. Or let's say $1,000 and 1,000 customers gives you $1 million in revenue, right? So you should figure out, can you reach, if somebody is willing to pay you $1,000, can you reach 1,000 customers of a very, very similar time, which is a target customer segment. But if you're going after the second segment, which is $500, then you need to find double those number of customers, because your price has become half, right? Then you need to know, can you reach 2,000 customers, right? And how effectively can you reach them? right? And if it is $100, then you need to do 10x, right? And then your marketing style changes, your marketing channel changes, right? And are you good at it also, right? So you should know, what are you good at? Sales? Are you good at marketing? Which segment to go after? So break down these segments. You learn about these by talking to these segments as much as possible and evaluating them in the early stages, and also looking for similar proxies of similar businesses who's selling to whom, right? Somebody who's very similar business as yours, if you can kind of identify, okay, this large business or this interesting business, this startup has built a very large business by selling $100 product, and the product has some similarities to me, and they've gone after a certain segment, and I also can go after that certain segment, and I also can do the kind of marketing they are doing. That's a proxy for me, right? So you can learn through 2 3 ways: direct customer conversations, and trying and learning from other proxies of different types of businesses doing customer acquisition, right? And of course, trying to learn from various other literature and sources, secondary aspects of research as well, right? But I would say two things, right? Direct customer conversations and learning from companies that are doing something very similar, right? And observing them very, very closely are the best ways to learn.
So next question is by Navneet. So he's asking that is it possible to raise fund pre-revenue?
It is absolutely possible. Our fund invests mostly pre-revenue, right? So most of the funds, yes, do look for some early revenue and traction as validation that the idea and the concept has, will work, right? That is true for majority of the funds out there. But there are a lot of super early stage funds like us and a few others, right? There could be some angels as well that you can raise money from, and some micro and seed VCs that are happy to invest at the stage of, either sometimes even as early as idea and the concept. If you can explain to them why the idea and concept is so path breaking and so innovative, they'll be willing to listen to you. And you have to explain to them. If they're able to be convinced of that, they can put money at that stage. You can raise money once you've built a basic version of your product, right? Which is like an MVP or a prototype, right? We are the type of investors who are happy to do that also, right? Okay, you made the product. Now I can see something, right? I like the demo of the product and I see how the value can be. You can also validate that by showing that I have shown this demo to 5 customers and they have said good things about it. They have said that they are willing to use it and try it out. They have not yet started paying for it, so I don't have revenues, but I have trial customers, right? So, right? And then the third thing is the product is live and it's getting used, and maybe revenues will come in some time. That's also a possibility, right? At the end of the day, the founder's job is to, founder has a deep conviction about what he or she is building. And therefore, his or her job is to translate this conviction by by having a lot of knowledge and in-depth knowledge about the sector, the market, and the customer, and therefore sharing this story and this conviction with the investor. And if the conviction is shared, and if I as an investor get convinced, right, I will be happy to invest, right? Saying this is an opportunity, this is the correct founder. He has done his research. He has come with a lot of insight about the customer segment, about the opportunity, about the innovation, about competition, right? Do all of this research. Be prepared, right? So nobody is going to give you money if you are not prepared, if you don't have depth. Even without a product or without revenues, you can have a lot of depth because of the time spent and doing a lot of research, primary, secondary also, right? And that is what investors are looking for. Strong founder who has a lot of knowledge in the domain that they are functioning in. Hope that is useful. So absolutely,
Uh,
that's it.
yeah, Arjun. So you were saying something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So the last question probably this is by Yumit. So he's asking that what about the chance of theft of idea while sharing with investors and getting feedback survey from users, or should I go only after?
Interesting question. A lot of people ask this question, uh, and fair question to ask, right? I'm of the opinion and strong opinion that Investors are in the business of finding great entrepreneurs and investing in them. And hence, that is their business model and that is how they make money. Investors are not in the business of stealing an idea and doing it themselves. Right? So I would say if you have a strong idea, if you have a good idea, do your own research, be very clear about it and have depth in it. Don't worry about somebody else stealing it. Right? Particularly investors, right? Other entrepreneurs, yes. But even there, if you have the depth, if you have more knowledge about your customer and your segment and your market and how you are going to build the product and how you are going to innovatively build the product, how your product is going to be 10x better, just by telling that to somebody verbally in a 1 hour conversation, that person, I don't think, can become better than you in what you've done. You would have spent a few months or even longer in some cases understanding nuts and bolts of what you're trying to build and what you're building. Right? Nobody can just in one day learn from you in 1 hour and then become better at what you're trying to solve than you. I agree there are certain innovations, right, which could be very complex, which could have core IP, and those, and you may have a patent on something, you may have a very exceptionally deep innovative way of doing it, and you need not share that at the early stage. But conceptually, you can share what you're trying to do, particularly with investors, right? I don't think you should ever fear that, right? Otherwise, because two things, because of both things. One, that's not the investor's job. Okay. Investor's job is to find the best entrepreneur to solve a particular problem and to build a great opportunity, right? And he will invest in them, right? So investor is not looking to steal your idea at all, right? If that was the case, this business model of investor and entrepreneur would never work, correct, in the startup ecosystem. So don't worry about it. Second, be the absolute best, try and become the absolute best expert on what problem you're trying to solve as an entrepreneur, as a founder, right? That is what is your safeguard against anybody stealing your idea, right? You are better than everybody else. You have done more research. You have talked to more customers. You have done more competitive analysis. You have thought about how you will solve it. You have, analyzed everything possible, right? That weeks, months, and sometimes years of effort and knowledge building, right, is what is your differentiator. So depth and focus is what will make you win, right? If two people, there are ideas are a dime a dozen. Execution is what matters, and depth is what matters, right? There is always possible that two people or two companies can start the exact same idea in a very similar time frame. But the person or the company that the startup that executes better invariably wins, right? So that keep that in mind and don't worry about sharing your idea, right? There are certain aspects of your idea which could be complex papers, white papers, or you've written a patent and all of that. That can be shared at the appropriate time, maybe not in the first meeting. That you have to safeguard at your end. But other than that, I would not worry about idea sharing in such an early stage for sure, right? What you have to build, launch, and get customers is the most important thing, right? Until then, the idea is just an idea on paper, right? Anybody else also can come up with it, right? I would say, for example, there are so many examples of things being very similar, right? Uber and Lyft in the US. They didn't start very far away from each other. Very similar idea at that time. The timing was right. There's a competitor. You could say competitor copied everything, whatever, right? But whatever Uber did, continued to innovate, continued to move faster, continued to add one feature extra, right? Yes, finally both succeeded in their own way because the market was very large. But Uber is a much bigger company than Lyft, right? So you could call one the copier of others and so on and so forth, but it's okay. What is important is final execution. That matters, right? Hope that answers.
So, Arjun, will you be taking up the last question we have from Abhinav, or should we close?
No, I can give 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes, no problem.
Yeah, sure. So this is just on the legal aspect. So Abhinav is asking that if you could throw some legal aspect on the initial stage of startups, like is it necessary to register before launching the product?
No, it's always good to do that, particularly before launching the product. If you launch the product, there will be things like, trademark, registration, so on and so forth. So if you have an entity, if you have a company set up, right, you can associate that with, you know, a trademark or a patent or whatever, or a, you know, brand name also, for example, right? If you don't have it associated with something, somebody else can use that name very easily, and because you don't have a legal entity to which that it is attached. At the idea stage, maybe you're just building prototype, right? Maybe you're just still coding it up, it is still in stealth mode, right? Maybe that's fine. That time you have to do a legal setup and all of that, right? But launching, going live, getting customers to use it, and then getting money out of them, getting revenue out of them, by the time it's best to have, right, a legal entity that, you know, your product is associated, that owns all of these assets, right? Then the code is yours, the product is yours, you have IP on that, you can claim all of that, right? Of course, legal technicalities best answered by a lawyer, but you should, you know, before launch, I would definitely recommend that you have a legal entity set up.